will be.
I need the best.
I had the best words.
Well, I'm the best there is.
The best. We the best.
Have a chance to be the best of the best.
You are now listening to Best of the Best, presented by Radar Studios. Starring two guys who use their middle initial to sound cool. Here are your hosts, Neal E. Fischer and Mark P. Smith.
Talking about the Cosmic Key, I also wanted that when I was a kid. I thought it was the coolest looking thing. And just like the boyfriend in the film, I thought it was like a musical instrument. And it was like a great synthesizer. And I just thought it'd be like the...
You mean 80s Chris Pratt?
80s. No, actually, I was thinking of that. 80s Chris Pratt, and he's a mixture of Chris Pratt and Andrew McCarthy, but blonde.
Okay, I like that take.
Yeah, I love that he goes to the music store, and there's this guy who looks like he has no concept of how instruments work. He's wearing a weird outfit, and he's like, yeah, that's totally Japanese. Yeah. And then he's like, no,
because
it's
he has
not.
a Japanese jacket on. He has some kind of weird.
He's like, it's totally Japanese, and the guy's like, no, it's not. Check this out, and then all the weird stuff comes out of it. And the guy's going nuts.
So yeah, what you're about to listen to is an interview we did with Gary Goddard, who is the director of Masters of the Universe.
Great interview.
We covered Masters of the Universe in a previous episode, and we just thought we should reach out to him. He only made the one movie, and we thought that was interesting. He also designs amusement park and theme park rides. And that's his main business now. So we thought we'd get a hold of him. So he was gracious enough to give us his time, and we have a nice little conversation.
Yeah, it was a wonderful conversation. Gary is one of the coolest people that we've talked to. He goes over his entire career, and it's just astounding the amount of projects that his hand was in or his creative input was in. Whether it's theater productions, theme park attractions, new innovations in technology,
toy lines,
films, and just sort of the side stories that go along with those films. He's someone who, doesn't pull any punches. He just tells you how it was and how his experience was. He's not bitter about anything. He's a guy who has fun in everything that he does. And, when you're a filmmaker, you have to, make light of a bad situation and have fun with it. And he obviously is still super passionate about film and about the arts, and it really comes through in the conversation. And it was just, there's not much more I can say about it. He was just so interesting. I could have listened to him for a few more hours.
Yeah, so take a listen and enjoy it.
We're just, super fascinated with your career, and especially me, just from also having a background in theater and just seeing all the different facets of filmmaking and the creative process that you've been involved in. So I guess what would you say is sort of the kernel of your interest in the arts? Was it theater? Was it a filmmaker, or a film, or a play you saw? What was the start of your creative journey?
Oh, it started when I was a kid. I was in my first play in first grade. So. And I did a lot of plays in Santa Barbara, and Santa Barbara was a very arts-oriented town, good place to grow up, a lot of theater. So I started with theater, but by my first year in high school, I was making my own little 8mm movies, too. I was doing that. And by my junior year, I was writing my own musicals, book music and lyrics, and starring and directing in them to get them up on stage. I did... The Three Musketeers when I was a junior, and my senior year I did the Journals of Lewis and Clark. Journals of Lewis and Clark won the Southern California Thespian Award for Best Original Play, and that tied into me auditioning for CalArts, and I was accepted at CalArts. And to show you how varied things are, I guess I auditioned for the School of Theater. In the first 2 years of CalArts, the School of Theater and Dance was one school of Theater and Dance. But by the time I auditioned, because I heard about CalArts a little late in the day, the theater school was already full, but Herb Blau, who was the dean of the theater school and the provost, he said, well, you're a good actor, but we're all full, but do you dance? And I said, well, I've danced in musicals. I'm not a trained dancer, but I've danced. He goes, well, go audition for Bella Lewitsky because she needs male dancers right now. And if you get into the dance school, you'll be able to take the acting classes because we have an agreement between the two that dancers can take acting and actors can take dance. I said, okay. So I auditioned for her, and I got accepted. I found out when I got to school why. There were only 5 male dancers and probably, 50 females, So she really was desperate for male dancers. So I was in the dance school the first year primarily with some acting classes. Then the next year, I also had taken some film classes. I registered for some film things. Alexander McKendrick was the dean of the film school, and he directed movies like The Man in the White Suit for one of the Ealing comedies with Alec Guinness, and he directed High Wind in Jamaica. He directed, I think, What Makes Sammy Run. A lot of pretty good movies that he had done. So I auditioned for the film school, and I got accepted. So the second year, I moved over to the film school. By the end of that year, I was kind of bored with school and was going to move on, but then Michael Addison became the dean of the theater school, and he had directed me when I was in 8th or 9th grade in a production of Merchant of Venice. I was the clown. I was Peter. And so Michael called me. I guess he saw my name on the student curriculum and said, aren't you coming back to the school? I said, no, I don't think so. I think I'm going to move on. He goes, why don't you come back to theater school? Because I'm going to be the dean, and, you're a great actor. I said, okay. So I thought he was inviting me in, which he was, but I still had to go audition. So it's kind of funny. I had to audition for the dance school. I got accepted. For the film school, I got accepted. And then for the theater school, I got accepted.
So you're a triple threat.
And, yeah, that was, kind of cool when you look back. It's interesting that I was able to cut it in all 3 of those. And that's kind of a metaphor for me, I guess. I'm a jack of all trades and maybe master of none. I'm not sure. because I was always interested also in theme parks because I grew up in Santa Barbara and we'd go to Disneyland once a year as a family, after it opened. And I always was a big Disney fan, but not like of Disney memorabilia and merchandise, but of anything having to do with the history of animation and that. And I got to know the 9 Old Men pretty well. When I went to CalArts, I arranged a tour and met all of them, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson and Milt Kahl and John Lounsbury and Les Clark and Woolley Reitherman, Ward Kimball, all of them. And I stayed in touch with them most of that time through CalArts, and I would go visit the studio, I don't know, like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times during the school year. And then through a weird, series of events, I wound up getting hired to go to Florida right after I graduated from CalArts to Disney World to ostensibly co-direct this Wild West dinner show they were considering doing, the Hoop-Dee-Doo show. And went there and wound up more than co-directing. I directed probably half the show because the guy that was directing it had to be in meetings and things. He would say, well, you meet in the morning with the cast and you take them through this and you take them through stage this, stage that.
So
and
basically
then,
you do all the work then, basically.
Yeah, basically. And then the show was supposed to only run that summer. And after the show opened, a week later, the California Disney employee who was supposed to be directing flew back to California. By the end of the summer, they wanted to keep the show on, and they were going to make offers to all the college kids. And I said, I don't think you can do that. And they said, well, of course we can. I said, well, let me rephrase that. Yes, you can. I'm like 22, but the president of the entertainment division, vice president, who's telling me they want to keep the show on. We want to sign all these guys to contracts. And I said, well, you can, but if you sign these kids to contracts, they're all going to sign it. But that means they're not going to go back to college, and you're going to have some very irate colleges and parents across the country who are going to say that you entice them out here and then, basically encourage them not to go back to school and get their degree. And they went, oh, yeah, you're right. I said, yeah, that wouldn't be good for Disney, would it? No. And I can't believe it. The head of the entertainment division, but then I found out later he had no experience in entertainment. He was formerly the president of the Boy Scouts of America. But he looked at me and goes, well, wow. What do we do? And I said, well, we could audition professional talent here in Orlando and put a new cast in, and we probably don't have to close it down for a week. We'd rehearse off-site, and then we'd bring him on the stage. And he looks at me and goes, can you do that? I said, yes, I can do that. Because by then I directed productions of Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar and Oliver and Man of Launch and all kinds of stuff. So, oh, wow. So set up the whole thing and auditioned the professional cast. And then they also said, rather than one show a night, we'd be doing 2 shows a night, 7 days a week with no nights off. So we actually had to cast like 4 casts, 2 full-time casts, 1 swing cast, and a couple stand-ins in case we needed them, so that we could always guarantee 2 performances a night. And then about 2 years later, after I was gone, they went to 3 shows a night. So that thing is 3 shows a night, 7 days a week now.
Wow.
It has been for 20 years, but it's been running since I was in college. Never mind how many years it is. That was a lot of years, I'll tell you that.
Where do they show that? Is that in the Magic Kingdom or is that in the...
No, across the lagoon at Fort Wilderness, where
Okay.
the Wilderness Lodge is.
Oh, okay.
And,
I think I've seen that.
the campgrounds.
I grew up
Yeah.
in Florida,
It's-
South Florida, so we went to Disney World a lot.
Well, you'd remember it. Fried chicken and barbecue ribs served
Yeah,
at your table as part of a musical number.
I think I've seen it, yeah, now that you say that. I
Yeah.
think we did stay at Fort Wilderness when I was a kid a couple of times. And is it,
Hoop-de-doo.
so it's still going, though. That's interesting.
Oh, no, it's still going.
Oh,
And
wow.
they make a lot of money. That is a highly successful operation for them.
Well, I've talked to a lot of the actors that we've worked with, or friends of mine in the city who might do improv or other small shows, and a lot of them, have great success going to, shows at Disney World or Disneyland, and having that. I know it's a rigorous schedule, but it seems like sort of a great job for someone to get their feet wet and kind of get the mechanics down before they want to maybe go to New York or LA and do film work.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's a good place to start, and they have a lot of jobs, a lot of performing jobs. So and a high turnaround, So so there was that, and then once I directed that show, and then I was getting a little bored, so I think I stage managed there were about 6 stage managers for the grand opening of Space Mountain, the Space Mountain celebration, and then I moved over to the Polynesian Luau. They wanted me to theatricalize that a little bit more, some different lighting and work with the Polynesians, which I did. And then I was getting bored, and I was going to move to New York, actually, and do theater. But I've always, as you can tell, I have a lot of interest. So I went up to New York. I had 2 weeks of vacation coming, so I spent most of it in New York, came back thinking I was going to pack and move to New York. But there was a call waiting for me that from Imagineering in California. I don't know how they heard that I was leaving the company, but Mark Davis, who I knew pretty well by that time, Mark had lobbied for me to, maybe come to Imagineering. And so I called, and they said, yeah, we want to interview before you leave the company. So they flew me out, first class, and they had a car waiting for me at the airport, and they had reservations at the Universal Sheraton Hotel, which was the best hotel in the valley at that time. And I got in there on Saturday, and on Monday morning I drove over in the car they had for me and had a meeting with John Hench, Marty Sklar, Mark Davis, and Orlando Ferranti. And they said, do you want to come work here? And I said, yeah, I guess so. It was a very short discussion, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I said, okay. Mark, do you have something you can work on? Yeah, I'm working on that barn on Fort Wilderness. You can work me on that, the fun house, and blah, blah, blah. And I was, okay, well, go upstairs with Orlando, and he'll do the paperwork and make your deal. And when can you be here? I said, well, I'll have to go back to Orlando and drive my car back, so I guess I could be here in a week or so. All right, we'll see you in a week. Can you be here on Monday? I said, yeah, sure. Went back home. At that time, because I was, fresh out of college, a year and a half, whatever it is, you can pack everything you own in one car, So packed the car and headed back to California and started work at Imagineering that Monday. And then during all that time, I was also writing a couple screenplays, and Paramount bought one. And so I started on my writing thing. That led me to Bo and John Derek at Paramount Studios. Bo had just finished 10. And so she was the biggest female star in the world at the time.
I was just going to say, yeah.
And they hired me because it's a very convoluted story, but Maxine Goldenson, the daughter of Leonard Goldenson, who founded ABC, she had a office on the lot. And I ran into her, and we met, and she talked to me. And she's the one who introduced me to Derek's because she had gotten a title from Marvel Comics called Dazzler, but they didn't have a story yet for Dazzler. They just had a title. And she said, I have this title from Dazzler, and I talked to the Dereks, to Bo Derek and John Derek, and they're interested, but they want to know what the story is. Can you create a story for me? I said, yeah, I could probably do that. So I created a story which was kind of set in a post-Holocaust era here, and a Joan of Arc kind of character. And rather than make it obvious, Dazzler was not the same. Was not the name of the character. Dazzler was the name of a sword that she would one day hold, kind of an Excalibur, thing, but with a Joan of Arc twist. So I did a little treatment, 20 pages or something, and gave it to Max, and she gave it to the Derricks, and they flipped out. They said, "We like the way this guy writes," and so that led to a meeting, and we're writing. At that time, they were in the middle of making what was supposed to be a movie called Me, Jane. It was John's idea to tell the story of Tarzan from the point of view of Jane, which was actually very ahead of his time. It's before Wicked. It's before all of these revisionist stories have been happening. So that's the movie he thought he was making, but MGM found out soon that the only rights they had was to remake Tarzan the Ape Man that they'd made in the 30s, I think.
Oh, wow.
And so they were having troubles with the script, and midway through working with them on what was going to be Dazzler, John said, "We really like your writing. Would you come on and do a dialogue polish on Tarzan, because we're not happy with the dialogue?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I, because everything I've been doing for them on Dazzler was spec, was just working with them, to try and get it to a point where it become a deal. Right. And then the difference with Tarzan was, that's a WGA, that's a real deal, that's a studio, it's MGM. So I said, sure. So made a deal to do the rewrite on Tarzan. And about 3/4 of the way through the dialogue polish, I've had several meetings with them. In the middle of this last meeting, they go, "Look, we love everything you're doing. We hate what it's based on. We want you to do a page 1 rewrite of the whole screenplay, but we're going to start shooting this in like 6 weeks. So, you'd have to be able to do it quickly, and we're going to the Seychelles Islands next week. We want you to go with us," and da-da-da-da. I'm like 24 then, I think, or something.
Oh, geez.
I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool, So that's how I got into, I wound up writing Tarzan the Ape Man for Bo and John Derrick. It says written by Tom Rowe and Gary Goddard. I never met Tom Rowe, but Tom Rowe had done the first draft of the rewrite.
How were the Derricks to work with? Were they?
Well, actually, they were great. Back in the day, they had this reputation for being wild, crazy people. But they were in bed by 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I lived with them for almost a month in a mansion in the Seychelles Islands. They wanted me right there under their nose, so they could be sure I was working all day. And it was so funny. Bo Derek, at the height of her stardom internationally, is making me breakfast and lunch every day because they don't want me to go to restaurants. They don't want me to leave. So, and it was fine. So Bo Derek in a robe, making breakfast.
Basically, probably every high schooler's fantasy at that point.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it was so funny. It was like, okay, this is great. She wouldn't let me take a picture of her like that, though, because I wanted one picture. Can I just have one picture, Bo, of you serving me breakfast? I'm not going to do anything with it. I just want it.
That's hilarious.
So, anyway, and then that led to me directing Masters of the Universe indirectly. I had done the Conan show at Universal prior to all of that, or around the same time. I don't know. The years get mixed up. Let's see, 81, I think.
Yeah.
I think I was doing the Conan show around the time that I met the Derricks, and then I think the Conan show was up on its feet by the time I went to the Seychelles Islands, I think. Ed Pressman was looking for a director for Masters of the Universe, and I found out about it, and I called him and introduced myself, and he said, "Well, you're really a director?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I did the Conan show at Universal and this and that, and I understand about special effects, and I went to Cal Arts, I was a film student, da-da-da." Told him all this, and so Ed said, "Well, let me go see the Conan show." And so he went to see it, and then he called me and goes, "Okay, I get it, you're a director, and you get the genre, you get all this." He said, "There's one problem, though. You're a first-time director, and, Mattel has approval on 2 elements. The star, which they've already approved, Dolph Lundgren, and the director." And I said, "Well, you won't have any trouble with Mattel with me." And they said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because I'm consulting with Mattel on 2 or 3 of their toy lines, and they know that I understand brands, and they know that I'll respect their brand, which is really that's going to be their main concern." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." So he called Mattel, and they said, "Yeah, well, we believe in Gary." So
what were you
that helped
consulting
me
with? Do you mind if I ask?
I'm sorry?
The other toy lines you were saying.
Well, we were doing some stuff for Milton Bradley at the time. Okay, one of the little-known things about me is I designed the characters for the Candyland game.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. My kids
Candyland
love that game.
The game Candyland existed before that, because I used to play Candyland with my grandmother.
Okay.
It's called a child's first game because there's no numbers and there's no letters. You move ahead by colors.
Yeah.
So they had the Lollipop Woods and the Ice Cream Sea, and they didn't have the Candy Castle. They had Home Sweet Home. There were no Licorice Woods, but there was the Molasses Swamp and the Peanut Brittle House and the Gumdrop Mountains. So we created the characters based upon those lands. So, King Candy, and we said with King Candy, we think we should replace Home Sweet Home with the Candy Castle. And we invented a villain, the Lord Licorice, in the Licorice Forest, who wants to take all the color away from everything. And Queen Frostine of the Ice Cream Sea, Princess Lolly of the Lollipop Woods, Mr. Mint of the Peppermint Forest.
They're all there still.
And Jolly, the Gumdrop Mountain Greeter. So we created all those characters. The funny thing is, when they came to us, they said, well, this is one of our crown jewels. We don't want to mess it up. And, corporations have this idea that if they change anything in something, it might somehow take away the magic that makes it, sell. So it was a very step-by-step process, and we designed the characters and sent them to them. And then they sent us back the board, and they had taken out all the lands and just put our characters there. And I called them and I said, well, these characters were designed to go with the lands.
Right.
It's supposed to be Princess Lolly of the Lollipop Woods. And they were like, well, we don't know if there's room. I said, no, there's room. I said, why don't we let us lay out the board game for you. We'll stick to exactly your path, but we'll do the artwork. So we did. We had a great Disney layout artist do it and a great Disney background painter paint it. And same thing we wound up doing the cover and everything else for them. And so that's what they went with. They manufactured the entire board game and test marketed it in three cities first, just to see how it does, with no PR, nothing. Just put them on the shelves and see if they sell at least as good as the other games did it, or hopefully better. And they sold better across the market. Wow. So then they went to mass manufacturing, and so yeah, at the end of the day, I created the characters for the Candyland game.
I actually cut a Candyland commercial too, so there's a weird, which is like maybe
really?
like 4 years ago, yeah, and all those people are still there. We got a bunch of free board games, or 4 free copies of it, I guess, out of it. And my kids, that's like, I have a 3-year-old, so of course it's like really, really fun.
Well, the new artwork is not ours anymore. I'm not a fan of the new artwork. It's very garish and very over the top. I prefer the original stuff that we did. I'm waiting for them to wise up and put out the classic Candyland game, which will be ours. Like Coke Classic.
Yeah, or like all
I still think ours will outsell their other ones.
Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, they're releasing all that stuff now because
a lot of people
sort
are
of the
doing
year
that.
of nostalgia. Yeah,
a lot of people are doing that. Cereal companies and other board games are like that game where what's the game?
Guess who?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I can't think of it. It's not it's not important, but that's really interesting. Oh my god, that's so many things, and it's such.
And then, well, because we were doing all that, we had sold them a concept called Snuggle Bums, and Snuggle Bums was ours. That's what introduced them to us and why they came to us for Candyland. And then at that same time, we were on a consulting contract with a monthly payment from Mattel to work on consulting whatever they needed help on. They just bring us in to look at things and give them ideas. And so we were working on concepts for the He-Man line a little bit, but more on a couple other things. And then the other thing was we had pitched them our own concept called Peanut Butter Papers, and they loved it, and they were going to do it. And then the president of Mattel had a heart attack and died. Glenn, what was his last name? And he was the champion of it. And when he died, then that killed that. But by then we'd met them, and then we took them Captain Power, which I'd created. And Captain Power, they got behind in a very big way.
Oh yeah.
We did the live-action interactive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a live-action interactive television show. And in fact, I couldn't be at my own premiere of Masters of the Universe at the Chinese theater because I was in Canada in the middle of production on the Captain Power show.
Oh, wow.
This is so
we were
fun.
just talking about this
our creative director, Steven, one day spent about 6 hours
going,
there's this show. It's really great. I think it might have been in Canada, and it had something Captain in the name. And after about 4 hours, someone finally Googled it and found it, and he went crazy because he's like, this is my favorite show ever.
That's cool.
And it's so funny.
That's great. Yeah, so we were up in Toronto producing 22 episodes of Captain Power on the night that Masters of the Universe opened in Hollywood, so I couldn't be there. I snuck out around 8 o'clock just to go sit in the back of a house in Canada and see how the audience was reacting to the movie. That's how I spent the first night of the movie. I bought a ticket and watched from the back of the house in Toronto.
How was that experience? Just like after all the hard work that you did, just seeing an actual audience who has no preconceived notions of how it might have gone on set or how long the process was.
Oh, it was good. The audience in Canada liked it, and actually a lot of the audiences liked it. The critics were not too kind, although we did get some good reviews. But it's tough when you do anything on a toy line. There's a built-in prejudiced from the moment they go in. I mean, practically every negative review started with a paragraph or more of, well, this was a toy line, and it's a toy line, and this and this and this, and then it leads into, and you could really see how this film, was based on a toy line. And we tried everything that we could to elevate the story a bit and to elevate the thing. I didn't want to make a campy, stupid movie. I wanted to make a movie that, within the limits of the story, took itself seriously, and that's why Skeletor and the villains aren't cardboard. They have some depth, but the other thing was, we were stuck with the fish out of water story. Everyone wonders why we didn't do it in Eternia, because there was no budget to do it in Eternia.
Right.
And we started out with a $15 million budget that went to 17. And at that time, a film of that kind, if Lucas was doing it or anyone else or any other studio, they were between like $30 and $45 million. So we were still doing it for roughly half of what a major studio would do it for. Right. So the convention of bringing him to Earth, would let us keep a handle on the budget. But I came up with the idea of bookending Eternia so that it had some sense of epic scope, and so that was the rewrite. I mean, it was a couple things. I also, patterned Skeletor on some combination of Magneto and Doctor Doom, Jack Kirby type villains that I'd grown up with. The noble villain, the villain who thinks he's doing right,
Right.
Those are always the best villains too, because they have that purpose, and you can't really fault them for it, because they're so passionate about what they're doing, and you get it. It's not like they're a carbon copy.
They're very convincing. I mean, can I just say too, like, I think I speak for Neal too, that the reason why we had sought you out to talk to you was because we were just talking about He-Man and how much, because I was born in 81. You were born in the 80s, right, Neal? 85. And so we were just talking about how much we love Masters of the Universe. Like, it was definitely a staple of our childhood, to the point where, like, I think my mom rented it from our local store so many times that she bought it like 3 times over, I'm sure. And then she ended up just buying it one day. And can I just ask real quick, just to go back a little bit, so was there already a script for this movie before you came up?
Yeah, David had a script from David Odell. Ed Pressman had a script from David Odell, and it was very campy. It was very...
was it like the cartoon? Or
more like the cartoon. Okay. For instance, Skeletor's entire dialogue in the script was, "Get him!
Right.
Stop him!
Was there Prince Adam?
You!
Was there Prince Adam?
Things like that.
That element too?
Prince Adam was not in that one.
Okay.
And there were a couple decisions I made when I got into it. Basically, Franklin, I did a rewrite, which Ed Pressman refused to read, because it turns out David Odell was his best man at his wedding. I mean, they were really, really close. Okay. And David had written Supergirl, which was one of the most universally despised superhero movies of the time, and was not a very good script. But I didn't hold that against him, because you never know. Is it the director? Is it that? Is it what?
Yeah,
but then I met David, and I'm not going to say negative, except that David is very high-strung, and
mm-hmm.
meetings with David would wind up with him, literally screaming and walking out of the studio offices screaming.
Very defensive.
And I was
we
like,
know people
dude.
like that too.
I was like, dude,
yeah.
Dude, it's a He-Man movie. It's not, we're not curing cancer here, but let's, Anyway, I was determined not to make a Super Mario Brothers type movie.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And so I thought my job was to try and put flesh and blood in these characters as much as I could, and because it's a live action picture, it's not a cartoon, and
right.
I also knew that Dolph Lundgren came with the package. So
right.
what came with the package was the script and Dolph. And Dolph, what he brought with him was cachet, because he'd come off the Rocky film and he was a big star, so I understood
right.
it. But he was not really an actor. He's a much better actor today than he was then. And his role model at the time was Sylvester Stallone, because Stallone, he saw
right.
Stallone direct, star, act, write, So I got along with Dolph fine, but he had an acting coach on the set that didn't help things. And I was trying to direct him one day, I remember, and I saw him. I was telling him, would you please do this and please do that? And I see him look off his eyes, to his acting coach, who gives him some kind of hand signal. And I said to my AD, I said, tell the acting coach to get off the set. And I said, Dolph, you're taking your direction from me. I understand you have your acting teacher over there. That's fine, okay? But you're on the set now, so you're going to do what I tell you to do, not whatever he was signaling you to do. It's not a football game. So anyway, that was my biggest struggle, was to, and it's, what's kind of sad. His best moment as an actor is in the very last scene. It's where he finally, and I think it's because he was exhausted. We were shooting all night.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing was, my failure as a director with Dolph was I'd get him to do it right in rehearsals. We'd roll the cameras. And something in his brain, I'd say, okay, don't push so hard. Say it more like this. Use more breath. Don't, okay, he'd do it in the rehearsal. Okay, let's roll. Roll. And so, like, for instance, it would be, I will never kneel to you. Almost like whisper it. Just,
right.
Oh, I will never kneel to you. And he'd do it. Roll. I will never kneel to you. He'd like shout it. I go, okay, let's do that one more time. A little more like the rehearsal. Let's take it down a notch, And we'd get it right. We'd roll. And then, after like 20 takes, there's a certain point at which, as a director, you have to say,
yeah,
okay, we're going to move on, and we're going to fix this in post,
So was he just
on the
too,
last day of
too
shooting,
new? I guess. I mean, he seemed like
too new.
Once
and
the cameras were rolling, I had to overdo it or something.
I think he had the image of Stallone in his head at all times.
Right.
If you look at, but Stallone is an actor,
right.
And he makes those choices. And I think, Dolph had an image in his mind of what he's supposed to look like and what he's supposed to sound like, and I don't think he had a quite understanding of how it was coming off. And so when they basically were cutting me off. I was told, I'm shutting you down at midnight. This is it. You're done. And we weren't done making the movie. So we worked around the clock, and I pushed and pushed and pushed up till midnight. And I wanted to get this last shot where their swords clash.
Right.
Because that was a 65 millimeter effect shot from Boss Films, and that was one of the reasons it took so long. Those shots always took 2 to 3 hours to set up. They have to have a rock-mounted camera. They have to have there's all this crazy stuff you have to do to get those things. Today it'd be so much easier. Everything's digital. Nothing matters. Just move the camera where you want. No one cares.
Yeah.
So they've been, hanging out and fighting and the swords and physical. I think he really was exhausted. So if you look at the film, you look at the last line when they confront each other, the swords, they're ready. He pulls the sword out. He says, I have the power.
Right.
And then they go into that battle stance, and Frank Langella says, I have ached to smash you out of my, smash you out of my memory, to erase you from existence. And then he says, yes, I told you, it's about us. It was always about us.
Right.
And he goes, yes. And that line, the last line Dolph delivers in the film, which was the last one we shot, he hit it.
Yeah. I just watched this 2 nights ago, and I definitely thought of the same thing. I was like, that's the
he finally,
one of the parts where I felt like
moment,
he was,
yeah. In that moment, he got it.
How did you get?
It's like, I wanted to wind back and go, okay, can we go do all the other scenes again now?
How did you how did you go about getting Frank Langella to get on board with this film?
Well, it's interesting. I always liked Frank, but I had seen Frank in the Broadway production of Amadeus.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, a year or two before that, and he was unbelievable. And if you think about it, the character of Solari is much like Skeletor.
Very much, yep.
And that performance was so etched in my mind, and when we started talking about Skeletor, and I knew I had to have someone who could get a performance, I knew whoever it was going to have some kind of facial appliances, or I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew there would be facial appliances, masks, something.
Those look great too, by the way. Still,
that was Michael Westmore, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have an actor who could get a performance through all that. Right. I also knew Frank has those eyes. If you think back to Dracula and a lot of his movies, he has very expressive eyes, and the close-ups, they're very commanding.
Yeah, they look very creepy.
So I really wanted Frank. I did consider one other person at the time, and it was was the Uncola. It was that guy. Yeah, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. He directed the original production of The Wiz on Broadway as well. But I really zeroed in on Frank. I think Frank was my first choice, and so I had to fly to New York and meet with Frank and talk to him. But turns out his little boy was, I don't know, 6 or 8 years old right then, right exactly the right age, and so he immediately said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it."
It's interesting.
And he took it seriously. He didn't phone in the performance.
He's so good in that.
And he and I would bring in scraps of things. I mean, the dialogue that you see in the picture, none of that was in the original script. These are bits of Shakespeare and Moliere and all kinds of great thinkers that we would work into things the night before each scene. He and I would meet and we'd go over the scene and, well, you could say this, and I'd have bits and I'd written that whole monologue. The whole subplot. I guess not subplot. The driving plot.
Right.
Of him wanting to become a god when the window opens. That's all me, because I added the throne room I added the whole throne room scene in the opening and brought him back to turning at the end. None of that was in the script. The script really opened. Imagine none of the opening, and it opens with a teenage girl in her house. Someone bangs on her door. She opens it, and it's He-Man. Only he's there, and he's like he's almost dead. And so she pulls him in the house, and the story evolves from there. So you can see where that part of the thing is relatively intact, but I added all the other stuff. I wanted to juxtapose the Eternian airships and those kind of things against the contemporary settings of today. And so
such a great instinct.
Open,
Neal and I were talking about that. Like making the villain more prominent, especially going against like using Dolph Lundgren or whatever, trying to sort of make the movie
He's the character that you love to despise and you want to
yeah.
watch on screen, and you can't take your eyes off of him.
We were just talking about that.
Once I knew that I had Dolph, and once we had a read-through, I made the decision to make Skeletor the driving force of the movie, because I knew he could carry the picture. So the script became much more about Skeletor in a way, but that's not necessarily unlike Star Wars and Darth Vader, and you need to have a powerful villain. I mean, I knew Jack Kirby, and I used to go visit him when he moved to Thousand Oaks. So he moved from New York to Thousand Oaks. I looked him up and I called him up, and I think I was in my first year in college or something, and he's, yeah, sure, come by. Roz will make some sandwiches. It's okay. I came by, and Roz did make some sandwiches. But I remember he told me then, he goes, whenever you have a superhero, you have to have a villain that's more powerful than the superhero, because if you don't have a villain that's more powerful than the hero, you don't have a story.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no point. There's nothing to fight against, yeah.
So hence the idea that when we come into the story, Skeletor has already taken over. There was some immense battle that we're just catching the tail end of, and Skeletor has somehow pulled off the impossible. And how did he do it? He did it with the Cosmic Key. Well, the Cosmic Key is basically the boom tube from the New Gods. It was a MacGuffin device that would give because there was no description of how exactly. Or maybe there was. I can't remember now. Maybe the Cosmic Key was in the original, but not till later, because you didn't know what was going on. There's this guy, and she doesn't know who he is, and he's battle weary. He's had the crap beat out of him when she meets him, so she nurses him back to health.
All right. In the original
anyway,
script,
I decided I thought we should open on it. The way I sold it, by the way, was I conceived the opening in the throne room and the closing of the throne room. So I convinced Cannon, and Ed Pressman first and then Cannon, that roughly a third of the picture was going to take place in that gigantic throne room. So that justified the cost of it. I said, look, I'm gonna shoot, of this entire movie, a total of like 20 to 40 minutes is going to happen in that throne room. So that should justify the cost of building it, because I'm going to open and I want to open with an epic feeling. I don't want to open with a guy on a back door being pulled into a house.
Right.
I don't think that's the way you open this kind of film. I want to open with this. And, we almost got to Iceland for the opening scenes. And the last minute, Cannon cut that. So we had to go to Vasquez Rocks, which I hated. If we we got to Iceland and did the location scout. I have pictures from there. And then we look at a secondary place, and it's called Craters of the Moon in Idaho. That would have been better. Anything would have been better than Vasquez Rocks, but such is life.
Why do you say Vasquez? Because it was used so prominently, or were
yeah,
you
it's
just
used
not-
all the time.
Yeah,
In fact, there was this. Have you ever seen the movie by the college kid? He did a feature film that was his thesis, and he's going to make, the whole idea is he's going to do a remake. He's going to make a movie of the Bible. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
And there's a whole series of scenes where they're saying, "Well, you could shoot this at Vasquez Rocks." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to shoot at Vasquez Rocks. I'm not going. I will not shoot at Vasquez Rocks." Cut. He's at Vasquez Rocks shooting the opening scene.
That's funny.
What was it?
Oh, so that's me.
What was it like dealing with Canon? Because I know, Mark and I were talking about the other day just how interesting it was that when other studios, were doing 5-6 movies a year, they were, doing upwards of 40. Was it a situation where you walked in, you said, "Hey, we need this, this, and this," and they kind of wrote you a blank check, or were they actually pretty stringent and frugal with the money they were giving you, or the resources they were giving you?
Well, from a filmmaker's perspective, it was the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times being they had so much stuff going on that they really couldn't pay much attention. So what would happen is, literally, when I was out in Whittier shooting, our days would begin at like 6 a.m. or something like that, and I would get a call the night before because something had come to their attention. They want to meet with you. You have to come and blah blah blah. So I have to get up like at 4 a.m., drive in there, meet them like at 7 a.m., get reprimanded for 30 minutes. Why are you spending so much money? Why am I doing this? Why? I don't understand. When I made my movie, I could do this without the lecture. When I made the movie in Israel, it only cost 2 cents, and I could do this and that. And I said, it's different now. It doesn't cost 2 cents anymore,
Right.
And so, all these things, all these cost-saving measures ultimately aren't. Like, for instance, I recommended strongly they just make a deal with one of the studios to use a backlot for all that flying sequences, all the stuff at the end, the chase through the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No, they didn't want to do it because it was going to add 30% to those days and blah, 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 blah. Well, what happened was when you go out to the real streets of Whittier, you don't get the streets until sun goes down.
Right.
So, and you got to and they will not let you leave all the lights out and all the cables and everything during the day. So you literally lose half of your shooting time because you're waiting for them to get all the lights up and ready for the first shot, which usually takes you from the call time almost to dinner time. You're lucky if you get one shot off before dinner at 10 or 11 or 12, whatever time it is. And then you've got to wrap up about 2 hours before the sun's coming up because they got to clear all that for the traffic for that morning. So at the end of the day, it would have been better just to get a lot and just leave everything so you could come back and start right away instead of losing 4 hours of every 9 or 10 hour segment to, put up and tear down.
Right.
And so that was not wise, I think. And
Can I ask you just a couple of questions? I feel like that are the cosmic key is this is kind of a nerdy thing, but when I was a kid, that to me was like one of the coolest props. Like it was like the one where like when you go in a sharper image and you see like a lightsaber replica, and you're like, oh man, when I'm older, I'm gonna have one of those. And the cosmic key was one of those for me. Is there any way to or just talk about how that came about, the design of it, and because it's still such a cool thing.
Was it was engineered by Lucas's guy. What's his name? Stuart. It'll come to me in a minute. I pretty much told him what I wanted. I had this thing in my head. I said, I think when this thing happens, I think what should happen is when he pushes this button, all this thing, I think these arms should come out, and these things should be turning one way, and then the whole thing should be turning as well. So the whole thing is turning, and then individually these arms are turning, and then at the top there's like a pitchfork kind of a thing that's turning, and it's as if all these different forks are tuning into cosmic signals. And I did a really rough sketch of my idea of what I thought it should be, and I remember him going, that's not going to be easy. You want arms to come down. You want these things to turn this way while the entire thing is turning, while this is turning another way. Well, I said, yeah, can you do it? And he goes, well, it's not going to be easy to pack all that into a small thing, but yeah, I think probably. And, he did it. The guy's amazing.
Yeah. It was really cool prop.
I think the production design in the whole film is just outstanding. Like I watched it. I usually watch it like once a year, and it's just just the fact how epic it seems and all the work you put into it is so impressive. And I don't know, like for me personally, directing and I guess our whole studio, we're very intent on, surrounding either whether it's the director or the editor with, the best people at their jobs and all the different disciplines, art direction and sound and everything. And was that something that you kind of had in the back of your head in the beginning of the process? Like, you had Ann Coates work on, as editor, who's amazing. And then you had, great production designers and Bill Conti with music and everything. Was that something that you wanted to do?
I was trying to get around, when it all started, we had, Canon was going to give me all the regular guys. And I said, well, at that time, what worked for me was Monahan and Gorham, they wanted to elevate this picture. They wanted it to be the potential. So they let me have a little wider hand. Although I had to get guys who would meet their numbers or close to. And I lucked out in a few ways. Richard Edlund had just left Lucasfilm and created Boss Films. They'd only done three films at that time, so they were looking for things to do. And I had a special benefit that came out of that, which I'll tell you about in a minute. They gave me a list of composers, and none of them were sci-fi guys. But Bill Conti was on the list, and I said, Wow. And I guess because Bill just liked to work, so he would take any project that would come along that would meet his number. I mean, within reason. Maybe not any project, but
Right.
But it turns out Bill, when I called him, he said, everyone always calls me for the contemporary pictures, because he got branded with that was Rocky.
Right.
So I've never had my John Williams score. I've never had my big epic movie, so I'd love to do it. So that was great. So Bill came on board for that. I got Bill Stout because I knew Bill and I knew Bill's work, and we'd worked together on a few theme park things. But we had a common language because we knew Jack Kirby, Jim Steranko, Gilkey. We have a common language of films and of comic books and of artists and everything. So Bill came on as a concept artist. There was actually another production designer assigned to it, again, who'd never done sci-fi. And he was doing these very strange designs, and I was like, this genre is different. I don't think this is a little out there. I think we need to rein it back in. See, everybody, if you get people in the world of sci-fi that don't really understand sci-fi or superheroes and this stuff, they tend to do what for them is out of the box, but for you look at it and go, okay, this is just weird. This is not going to fly. And at some point he said, God, what was the line? He said, well, I don't really care because he says, I hate all this shit. So I said to my producer, Elliot, I said, Elliot, we have to replace the production design because he, quote, hates all this shit. So he's not going to do a very good job if he hates it.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
So, so he was a very talented production designer, again, in a different kind of movie, in contemporary kind of movies, doing a different kind of thing. You have to understand, I'm sure you do understand, we are creating a world with pictures like this. When you create the costumes of Eternia and the weapons, everything, you're creating a whole vocabulary for a world. You're world building, right? So he didn't get that, but Bill Stout got it. So I went to Bill and I said, "Hey, Bill, are you capable of? Are you interested in? And are you up for becoming the production designer on this film?" Because as far as I'm concerned, his concept designs were defining the movie anyway. And at the end of the day, he saved the whole thing because again, we had a costume designer who did not understand. She had done all these 80s teenage films, so she was fine with that part. All the schmutzkas and stuff for the teenagers, no problem. Right. She came in with some designs for the characters, for the Eternians that were, I don't know what they were, but again, they had no basis in creating some sense of a world, of something that had some kind of civilization to it that was different than ours and yet something we could understand. So I went to Bill. I said, Bill, you need to do some costume designs for her. And I went to her and said, look, you're still going to get the costume credit, so you should go with this. Bill's going to design the costumes. You need to execute them. And at first she was very offended. But I said, look, you have to do this or you can't be the designer on this because Bill understands creating worlds and this is not your thing. You're fine all the contemporary stuff. Good, great, great. But on this stuff, we need someone who gets it. So she said, okay, all right. And she did. She got credit for it, Bill really was a production designer on that in the old classic sense, in the sense that he designed the look of the picture, the costumes, everything. Execution was done by others, but he and I together created that universe. So the other benefit of I convinced them to use Boss because Boss had come out, Richard Edlund. I explained who all he was. And So they went with him. Well, one of the benefits is, I didn't know this till later, is, I knew that he used 65 millimeter, but I didn't think about it. So the way to get the quality effects in those days was 65 millimeter film, rock solid mounts. So at the end of the day, when we start making the film, they want to use, to save money, the same. You don't think about these things until you're in the midst of making a movie. They wanted to use the same color lab that they use for all the Canon films out of New York, because on a per foot basis they would save I don't know a lot, $200,000 or something. And I was fighting it because I suddenly realized there's a reason every Canon film kind of looks a little dull, a little dark, a little muddy. It's kind of a Canon signature,
like pushed out quickly type of look. Yeah,
because of that lab.
Yeah.
So as it turns out, Richard Edlund said, well, we have to use the MGM lab because they're the only lab left that does 65 millimeter. So then I said, well, the film's not going to cut together if the same lab doesn't do all the stuff. So I was able to use that, and I went to my producer Elliot, and together we went to Canon and said, look, I know you don't want to do this, but we have to run this whole picture through the MGM labs because of the 65 millimeter color shots. Otherwise, those shots will be crisp and clear, and they will have a different texture than the rest of the film. So begrudgingly, they agreed, and so we got. And there's a reason. I always say, if you look at Masters of the Universe, the film itself looks different, even than Superman. Superman, they were shooting almost the same time.
Right.
Look at Superman. Look at the clarity, the crispness of the images. Look at just the overall.
You're referring to Superman 4, is that right?
Of the film. Yeah, and you'll see that Masters doesn't look like any other Canon film, and it's because we're the only film that was able to use the MGM lab instead of the New York one where they sent all of their footage.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was an added benefit to having Boss on as a special effects guys that we didn't realize at the time, but it saved us from being one of the typical Canon pictures with that muddy kind of, muddy kind of dark
mid-tones,
look.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really a give and take then, because you have Whittier saying, well, you can't do a pre-light. You just got to come in here scrappy and do your huge effect sequence that needs a pre-light, but then at least you get the 65 millimeter lab. So I guess that's the trade-off when you're doing it.
Just to, because we know we're a little short on time here, I wanted to kind of just, I had a question in terms of like Masters of the Universe. Obviously we have fondness for it, but it seems like the world at large maybe doesn't or whatever. Did the making of that film dishearten you at all from filmmaking or what?
No, not at all. The only reason I didn't make any more movies, that's always the question. There were two things. First of all, I was already in the thick of Captain Power, so the next year after that, or 9 months or so, was really all about Captain Power because if you remember, summer of '87. Masters opened, and I think in the Christmas of '87, I think it was. Yeah, Christmas of '87, or not Christmas, October.
Okay.
I think Captain Power started airing in July, August, September, October. I think October or November, rolling into Christmas, something like that. So we were under the gun to get all that done, and then. While I was away making my movie, my company, Landmark Entertainment Group, was nearing bankruptcy, and so I went back to kind of put the company back in order, which I did. But then one thing led to another, and we started doing work in Japan. We started doing work in Korea, and so, and then I was doing a lot of work with Universal Studios. It eventually led me to doing the Florida project with them, Universal Studios Florida, and then Islands Adventure. Terminator 2 3D, the Spider-Man ride, Jurassic Park, and all these things.
So you got rolling then.
So suddenly your slate, your slate fills up with other things.
Right.
And so it was a decision. The decision was let the company go and go make your movies,
right.
or go back and fix the company. Now, I actually thought it would only take me a year or two to get things back, and I would be back making movies again. But that's not the way life works out. But we are now actually developing a number of projects. So I am, at least as a producer and maybe writer, hopefully going to have a few more things going on. I love to direct, but I'm not sure I can actually pull away from the company long enough to go direct another picture again, because as you know, that's a pretty much a full-time thing.
What is the amusement or theme park, what is that business like compared to filmmaking in your mind?
Well, it's still a challenging business because everybody thinks they know what a theme park is and what an attraction is and how it works, and most people don't really. The fact that you've gone to 30 parks around the world doesn't mean you actually know anything about theme parks, but people tend to believe they do.
Everyone's so
just like film, just like watching movies.
Yeah, exactly. It's challenges, but it's not as, I will say this, it's not as mean and as vicious as the film business. I mean, film business is a tough business.
Right.
And the film business, the best thing you can do is try and surround yourself with a good team of people that you trust and believe in, and try and move ahead with them as much as you can. And you'll see that most of the successful directors, Spielberg, Cameron, and you name them, that's what they have.
Right.
They are themselves very, very good. They're the best at what they do, but they are smart enough to surround themselves with people that know more than they do in their various other areas, and then they collaborate to create, most of the time, really great stuff.
Do you have a personal favorite in terms of the attractions that you worked on, or personal favorites?
Well, I think I like the fact that Terminator 2 3D and the Spider-Man 3D 4D ride, those were breakthrough things that really changed the industry. Plus, they're just great rides, great shows, and they're still as popular today as when they opened. So those are the top. I think that
that's
the Star Trek attraction we did. Yeah, and then the Star Trek attraction we did in Las Vegas was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I've been on the Terminator one for like I said, I grew up in Florida.
On Terminator?
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, so we went to Orlando a lot because it was only like 2 hours away from where I grew up, so I definitely...
Well, that was then you will remember, that was groundbreaking. I mean, it blew people away.
Yeah, it's pretty excellent.
And did you never get to see the Spider-Man ride? You left Florida by then?
Yeah. Well, when did the Spider-Man... Did that come out after the movie? Is that when...
No, before the movie, 1999.
Oh, okay. No, I was definitely gone by then, but I did not... I haven't been back to Universal, actually, since the mid-90s.
But I love the fact it came out before the movie, but people that went on it thought that it had to do with the movie because Sam Raimi directed the first Spider-Man movie, and Sam's my age. We grew up in the same comics, so he was essentially picking all the same villains I picked. I mean, basically, the ride started with the Sinister Six, and only if you're a comic fan would you know that. Right. So it was the Vulture, it was Electro, it was Doc Ock. It was also the Sandman, but they made me cut the Sandman to create that Hydro water character. I had the Lizard, actually. The Lizard was under the piers, and that's where we used the water gag. But they made me cut the Sandman, which was so stupid because the Sandman, think about it, for 3D, is there anything better than Sandman? Yeah. He could create a wall, whatever, right in front of you in 3D. He could use that sand to come right at you. And they traded him off for, which one? I guess it was the Lizard. They cut the Lizard and created that kind of water character instead, which I thought was stupid. And then they cut, I can't remember now. Anyway, it's pretty much intact overall, though. Doc Ock, the Goblin, the Fireball, the pumpkin fireballs, and all those things that were in the original storyboard are pretty much in the ride, including the Statue of Liberty finale.
I'm going to have to go back to Universal. When I go back to Florida, I visit all the time, so...
Oh, you should definitely go on the Spider-Man ride.
Yeah, I haven't been there. Yeah, I think about it. I haven't been there in a long time. So
one question I had for you about amusement parks, because I love going as well, and I love following some of the pictures that you post of the various places that you visit. But do you think sort of the upswing? I guess it's always been this way, but the upswing in attractions based off pre-existing properties, whether it's Marvel, DC, or cartoons, do you think that makes it, from your end, makes it easier because you're using a pre-existing property, or do you like it better when they say, hey, we don't have any ideas, here's a kind of a guideline, a budget, create something, completely original?
Well, having done both, I like both. Each one is a different set of challenges, though. But the danger with doing the the licensed properties is whether you can do them justice or not. So I think in our case, we delivered with Jurassic Park and with T2 and with Spider-Man and all these things we're doing. But a lot of times they don't. But Universal's done a very good job with the Harry Potter stuff. Disney just did an Iron Man attraction in Disney Hong Kong that's embarrassingly bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think when you have a prime character like that and a prime IP, you owe it to yourself. They took the Star Wars simulators from 30 years ago,
right? The
30-year-old technology,
Star Tours, yeah,
and slapped an Iron Man thing in it. And whoever did the story, I don't think really understands the Iron Man mythology, because it's these spider-like robots that are threatening Hong Kong, and it's like, okay, this is a typical theme park.
I've never
ride
even heard of
with,
the
no
Iron
surprises.
Man. That's funny.
But it just opened. Opened this, and I when I was in Hong Kong about a month ago, I took half a day off to go out there just to see it, because I wanted to see it myself. And not only is the actual ride not very good, but the building that you enter is small. I mean, it's like, okay, here's this multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Right.
Can't you guys design a better building and something a little more impressive, and create an attraction that's a little more, state of the art?
Well, especially Tony Stark, Stark Industries. I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah, well, they tried. That you're going through like the Stark Expo at the Stark building, but it's all just, it's the kind of theming you might expect more with Six Flags, or maybe a little above Six Flags, maybe Busch Gardens or something. But
yeah.
Definitely not the Disney standard, not even a Universal standard. So I was disappointed in that, and I think they should be aiming higher. I hope that their Galaxy ride out here in Anaheim is better. But once again, they've taken an old technology and they're going to try and put a new wrapper around it and call it a Marvel attraction. And I don't think that's really the way they should be doing it. I think they should be. I believe strongly in all the things that I've created that are great. The technology never came first. It was figuring out what was the right way to tell the story of this character, to put you on an adventure with this character.
Right.
And out of that, you get the idea of what technology you need to make that story come true.
Right.
The minute you start with, we're going to do a Star Wars, Star Tours ripoff, and it's going to be with Iron Man, go. You're kind of behind the 8 ball, and they didn't do anything to really advance it at all. Now, to be fair, the audience I was with in China, they liked it because they've probably never been in a Star Tours kind of thing before. So the audience I was with they were yelling and screaming in the right places, and so as pure entertainment for their Hong Kong audience, maybe that's enough. But as someone that expects Disney to raise the bar, I was disappointed. Now, on the other hand, the new Pirates ride at Shanghai Disney is unbelievably great. The creative, the staging, what they did there to immerse you in this world is
it like the one
really
like the classic one, or is it different? Like the
no,
classic?
no, it wipes all those off the map. And by the way, the California one's great for what it is, but there again, if you were just recreating that, you're taking 50-year-old technology practically. And but what they did was they gave it a whole new look, a whole new feeling. The way it works is giant screens and an amazing boat ride mechanism that lets you float through the world, sometimes going forward, sometimes kind of on the side, then backwards and coming back around. Pirates is fantastic. That's where Disney should be. And also the Tron ride, which is simple. It's just a coaster, but you get on a Tron-like bike, and it's different than any other coaster, and it's very, very cool. So I feel like in Shanghai, Disney has their mojo back. In Hong Kong, they just can't seem to get it right. Everything looks smaller, cheaper. Hong Kong feels like the budget park for Disney.
And I guess to sort of bookend the amusement park conversation, I know you're deep into it, but what would you say, or where would you say the industry is going in like 10 years? Like, what's going to be the next? Is it VR? Is it going to be like 4 or 5D, things like that, or where do you see it going?
I think follow Jim Cameron. Jim Cameron is setting the standard for cinema event pictures that are events and spectacular and yet still affect you emotionally. and he's always pushing the edge with new technologies. He's doing what George Lucas was doing, 25 years ago with sound and with everything else, and so I think that, and I tend to agree with them that I think VR is a different experience. It could be a great experience, but VR is more of an individual experience. You put on a helmet and you go on your adventure.
Right.
The motion picture experience of experiencing it with your friends or family or your kids or your date or whoever, that's hard to replace. It's still the best, cheapest form of a night out with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think good storytelling always triumphs, technology. But when you can, like with Avatar, combine the new technology and a great story and a great adventure, that's the best of all possible worlds. So I think there's room for VR, but I see VR more almost like DVD or videotape or something. It's an experience you're going to do more at home. Eventually, when someone finally figures out how you can put on a VR helmet and still communicate with your friends or date or parents or kids next to you on a ride or in a movie theater, maybe that will change, but I don't know. I don't think when you're in a group situation you want to put on those helmets for more than 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's very isolating.
Because it takes away the one-on-one experience that you have. So, the movie-going experience, theme park experiences, we are in the shared experience business. If you're not going with someone, I go to movies alone sometimes. If no one wants to go, I'll just go, well, I want to go see this. And I prefer to see movies in a theater than in my home, even though I have a home theater and everything.
Yeah,
of course.
I like the experience of going out, sitting in a theater, in a big theater with a big sound system, and seeing it the way the filmmaker intended it,
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah, better than
sure.
a cell phone or something. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that experience is here to stay in one form or another. And yes, they'll continue to improve sound, improve image, improve projection quality, and all that kind of thing. And we have 3D, and maybe we'll have some more 4D. We'll see. I think the 4D in movie theaters is kind of only interested for teenagers, for kind of party movies. But I think that has, and as a guy who helped kind of create that whole thing, I'm behind it. But I'm not sure, a feature film is where you want that. Because when we design these attractions for a park, they're designed very specifically for 3D and 4D. Those effects are worked into the overall fabric of the attraction. They're not just an add-on. So, in terms of the future, I still think that the shared experience of going to movies with friends and family or dates or whatever it is what makes that work, and that is a very different experience than sitting in your living room or at home in your home theater watching it with your friends. It's just a different experience. Both of them are valid, and I think VR has a role to play, but I think VR has a ways to go before it becomes a shared group experience thing. Right now, it's you put it on and you walk the tightrope and you look down from the World Trade Center, and
right,
and that's fine, but that's not something you can share.
Well, man, that's some good stuff. Thank you so much for us to take your time, and hopefully it didn't take too much of your time.
Yeah,
Thank you very
and
much.
I had a dumb question off the record. Maybe it's on the record, but when I was rewatching Meshes of the Universe a couple weeks ago, I caught this one line, and I'm sure you did not plan it this way, and it's just my old film analysis days kicking in. But when Courtney Cox is about to leave the fast food restaurant, she says something like, oh, this is going to be the last time I'm going to hand out this food, and her coworker says, oh, I'm sure they have fast food in Jersey. I don't know if that was a reference to her being in the Bruce Springsteen video, or was that just kind of a happenstance?
I think that was just a happenstance, although I should take credit and say it was a reference to the Bruce Springsteen video.
I never thought I'd feel sad about doing that for the very last time.
Don't worry, Julie. They've got fast food in Jersey.
Thank you.
I think I'll take that one.
Yeah, we know you're super busy, and I hope that you get some time off from traveling and working. And I was going to say, it seems to be a recurring theme where someone cool's wife makes you sandwiches, like Roz Goldstein or Bo Derek. So hopefully someone else's wife out there will make you a sandwich and give you a few hours rest before you have to go to your next job. But from two filmmakers to another one, just really inspiring stuff. It really kind of reaffirms what we're doing, and you seem to kind of be made from the same cloth as far as being a jack of all trades and just liking your hand in different things. So it's just great to hear another person so passionate like us, and we really appreciate all your time.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, guys, so that was the interview with Gary Goddard, the director of Masters of the Universe, Dolph Lundgren Whisperer, and also theme park aficionado. So we hope you enjoyed that episode. I know Mark and I just had a blast, and we hope maybe to have Gary on another time. Maybe we'll talk more about amusement park rides, because we think it's a really fascinating arena for the arts, for creative people, and we're curious to see where the industry goes.
Yeah, I like your little sandwich thread about getting other people's wives to make him sandwiches.
Well, I was just thinking, now, what do you think, just a quick tangent, what do you think the equivalent of Bo Derek making a young filmmaker a sandwich and breakfast in her robe every day for a month would be now? Because you talk about a guy like John Derek, he's a director, writer, and then his wife is, the hottest star at the time. I mean, the biggest female star in the world after 10, making you sandwiches in robes.
Jennifer Lawrence making you bagel bites every day.
Or, bagel bites or what, Hot Pockets.
Because she doesn't give a fuck, and she's just going to heat up bagel bites and throw them.
I think she's the type of girl that would make you bagel bites and Hot Pockets, and then in a robe, and then watch like The Bachelor with you or Shark Tank, because I know she's a big Shark Tank fan.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. We ask that you rate, review, and subscribe to Best of the Best on iTunes or your preferred podcast app. Have ideas for show topics, opinions, or just want to say hello? Send us an email to bestofthebestpod@gmail.com. Till next time, special thanks to Radar Studios and long live Don Hogue.